today by having each of our panelists introduce him or herself and give an overview of their experience during these disruptions. And first, we're going to start with Bruce Talbot, peach farmer and farm manager of Talbot Farms. Bruce, go ahead and get us kicked off.
All right. Glad to talk to everybody, but we are a grower, shipper, packer, processor of Colorado fruits. We're a family organization that's been here since 1907. I'm fifth generation. My kids are sixth generation, and my nieces and nephews here. We are, peaches is our main, that's 65% of what we do. We do about 30% wine grapes. Then we also produce some pears and some cherries. We produce sweet apple cider and have for about 40 years. And in the last 3 to 4 years, we've started producing hard cider. And last year, we've started producing wine. We also are a packer for a lot of other growers in our area.
And Bruce, can you just mention a little bit about how the disruption has impacted your business?
We have a really unique situation because the disruption, if we hadn't frozen out, it would be a bigger impact than it was. We froze out in the middle of April. And so when that happened, 42 of my guys went home or went to South Carolina because I don't have anything for them to do at that point. I'm down to 10. Normally I'd have 65 guys here right now. So we just don't have the volume of people here that would put some pressure on us to do a lot more with what we're doing. The social distancing, some of these kinds of things were relatively free from all that because just by the nature of what we do. Our biggest exposure is when the guys go to Walmart on the weekend. We're separated from everybody. The guys are living in the same houses. It's like big families, and they're traveling together and they're going to the same orchards. But with freeze, I'm down to a skeleton of people here. So it's on the retail side. We also have a tap room. I left that out. Of course, we didn't close completely because we are also selling food. But for a significant amount of time, we're closed container only for off-premise consumption. And we had about 20 events that were all canceled. My daughter the other day was all thrilled because she has her first new event set up for March of 2021. So.
Well, good. Well, thanks, Bruce, so much. I appreciate you participating today. Next, Kelly Hepler, president of the Colorado Agritourism Association. Kelly?
Hi, Wendy. Thanks for having me. And sorry we don't have better things to talk about or more exciting, fun things. This is kind of sad, but there are some silver linings. I have been the president of the Agritourism Association for about a year, but I was involved with the founding of the association 4 years ago and was on the team that wrote the strategic plan for agritourism for the state of Colorado and spent, about 3 years traveling around the state presenting kind of agritourism 101 workshops to individual people who are interested in getting into agritourism. So I have a little bit of a background with agriculture. I was married to a rancher for 15 years and have had my share of baby calves in the kitchen and freezes and fruit issues and et cetera. And, but I am a tourism marketing person by trade, commercial artist. So one of the things that I've seen a lot in talking with the people, mostly on the Western Slope at this point in time, is just the stress of not knowing what's next. And as you said, we had 2 things and now we've got 3. And 2 of those things people are pretty used to, the agricultural folks. The farmers and ranchers are used to freezes and droughts and et cetera. Not that they like them, but they have a better understanding of how to prepare for them. Now with this virus at play, we've got a virus that changes about every hour or 2 or maybe day or 2. And then we've got the rules and regs coming down from our health and public service safety people changing and rearranging things. So I've seen our growers be able to react and be okay with that. Agritourism by nature is kind of a small group activity other than big festivals. So we are seeing the festivals shut down, but it's really kind of shifted a lot. And Bruce and Josh can speak to this much better than I can, but just the way the food system has been disrupted with restaurants not being open, and then how the food got shipped from point A to point B, and then people would go to the grocery store and what they thought should be there wasn't there, and hoarders took on a whole new definition at that point. And a lot of my little smaller mom and pop farmers and people, especially with greenhouses, we're seeing folks show up at their place wanting to buy fruits and vegetables and things from them. And then that turned into a rebirth of the Victory Garden programs, and people weren't necessarily coming to buy, they'd buy, but they really wanted to learn how to do it themselves, and quickly learned it's not easy and went back to buying. So we're seeing some of that stuff kind of change up. I did say there was some good news about it. Some of the shifts have caused a couple of our lodging properties into particular, not a couple I've talked to, let's put it that way, have changed their business model from how many rooms are available and how many nights you can stay. And they're regulated that for 24 hours prior to your next guest, the room has to be empty for proper cleaning. So people are booking out further in advance and they're staying longer. So the folks I'm talking to are saying, I'm booked through September with a few days in between for those cleaning periods. And then our winemakers are saying, you got to serve food now. So they're serving small plates. So they're serving higher dollar items to fewer people. And one guy even told me he's up 26% over last year because of the new business model. Now that's unusual, and he's a small business. He's not big like Bruce, and his restaurant is not, he has a small B&B with a little foods program inside of it, and he's changed it so that the guests can access that on their own as well. So there are some good sides to it. People are appreciating the farmer a lot more now that food has been a little disrupted. They realize that this is a really tricky balance. So that's what I've seen.
Thanks, Kelly. Well, we're glad to have you. Thanks for joining us. And next, I'd like to introduce Chef Josh Nierenberg, owner and executive chef of Bin 707 Food Bar, Taco Party, Bin Burger restaurants in Grand Junction, and recent James Beard Award semifinalist. Congratulations on that, Chef Josh, and welcome. We're glad to have you. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thanks so much, Wendy, and thanks for having me. Yeah, my name is Josh Nierenberg. I am a fifth generation Colorado native. I've been here on the Western Slope since 2007. We left the Front Range where I was in the restaurant industry there for some time. We opened Bin 707 Food and Wine in 2009 and then moved to our current location in downtown Grand Junction in 2011. In 2011, we started with a model of just locally sourced everything as best we could. We were doing brunch, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week then. 2017, we added Taco Party, shortly followed by Dinner Party, as two new restaurants a couple of blocks away from Bin 707 Food Bar, also here in downtown Grand Junction. As of today, through COVID, we've seen some pretty major impacts, as has everybody in the restaurant industry. Bin 707 Food Bar is now condensed to operating 5 nights a week only, so we've lost our lunch service, and we previously had lost our brunch, but we're operating for just dinner now. We're doing curbside takeout. We had been doing delivery. We're now doing expanded patio. Through some of the amendments to the liquor licensing we've been able to take advantage of. We closed Dinner Party, which was a 50-seat private dining room, a couple of months ago, and actually opened a new restaurant in that space. We took essentially the lunch menu from Bin 707 Food Bar and turned that into Bin Burger, which was a quick service or counter service burger restaurant next to and attached to Taco Party. So our guests are able to order from both menus and kind of utilize more space within the building, which brought us up to about 7 total tables instead of just 3 as we had through the social distancing. All said and done, with all three operations, we're down probably 15% in sales for the month. We're down significantly greater for the COVID period. Bin 707 Food Bar, unfortunately, is operating about 30 to 35% of what it previously did. So Bin 707 Food Bar is by far the largest impacted. And with the largest gross sales coming from Bin 707 Food Bar, that means that the ecosystem that we've created is the largest impact as well.
Well, Chef Josh, thanks for joining us today. We're glad to have you. And finally, I'd like to have our Commissioner of Agriculture, Kate Greenberg, introduce herself. Kate.
Great. Thanks, Wendy, and great to be on with everyone. You know, I think what we hear a lot about the pandemic is, we're in unprecedented times. We hear that all the time. In ag, we hear about pivoting all the time, and it might be overused at this point, but it's nonetheless true. What Bruce and Kelly and Josh have all described is this incredible pivot overnight in food and ag. And we're seeing that from a department's perspective. We've had to do that at the Department of Ag. We went from being an on-site agency of 300. Well, a lot of our staff are remote, but everybody's coming into an office somewhere at some point, to being predominantly remote. Of course, that's not an unusual story, but we've gone through that as well. And what we've done in that transition is also figure out how to maintain our level of service for Colorado Ag while we're, getting our technology in order and figure out our COVID operations. So, and that's I think a drop in the bucket compared to what the businesses represented here have had to go through in terms of labor and how it's changed, how COVID and the freeze, right, have changed labor in ag, how COVID has changed our eating patterns. I mean, some of the earliest pivot points were around grocery stores, right? And we did a lot to manage sort of customer and consumer expectation around the food supply chain, making sure folks know that we have ample food, ample product, even though we're seeing incredible change throughout. And so much of that sense of security through incredible instability has come through entrepreneurship of folks in the field. So at the Department of Ag, I really see our role and our mission through COVID, as well as through drought, as well as through freeze or whatever disaster might be upon us, to figure out what resources we have at play to get mobilized to our producers, to our stakeholders in the field as quickly as possible. This is one thing we did with the freeze on the Western Slope, was moved to request a disaster declaration from Secretary Perdue. That has since been moved. With the drought, I'm co-chairing the Ag Impact Task Force that the governor activated a few weeks ago. And that team is, private and public entities who are looking at, again, how do we make sure we're getting what is needed out to the field at the right place at the right time. Same has been true for COVID. Every day there's layers upon layers of sort of smaller emergencies or crises that we respond to every day to keep things going, to keep folks healthy, to keep folks in business. Of course, ag has been a critical sector from the get-go, which, thank goodness we can keep the food supply chain moving, but it's brought on other issues that we have to manage for, getting adequate PPE out to the field, making sure we're supporting producers and changing their operations and figure out new marketing channels. Of course, Wendy, the work you do with Colorado Proud, and even that brand behind you is a product of COVID, right? So we've been thinking about how do we up the ante on our marketing and promotion of Colorado products to drive consumers to Colorado farmers and ranchers, to make sure that we're supporting our local family businesses across the state and keeping ag alive and healthy throughout all of the various emergencies and crises we're facing today.
Well, thanks, Kate, for that plug too. And I will just remind everybody too to visit our coloradoproud.com website that we did create in response to COVID to help connect consumers and producers. So at coloradoproud.com, people can find local producers and connect directly with them and find what local products they have and where they're available and how to buy them. So we hope that's a helpful resource for people looking for local at this time. Thank you all again for joining us. I really appreciate it. And we're going to shift now into our question and answer section. And we have a few pre-selected questions to get us started with our panelists, but the remainder of the hour is going to be questions that you all submit. So please use the chat feature to submit your questions, and we're going to do our best to get through as many of those as we can in the remainder of the hour that we have. And for those that we don't get to, we're going to post those on our website and have those in the coming days. So be on the lookout on the Colorado Proud website for all of the questions and answers, as well as the recording of this event. So to get us started, I'm going to ask Kelly a little bit to dive a little bit more into agritourism and what you can tell us about the challenges agritourism in Colorado has faced in the past few months, and what an example of maybe how a business on the Western Slope has adapted to address the new conditions.
I would say that what they're seeing challenge-wise is just staying one step ahead of what the guidelines are going to be and knowing how to improve that. As Bruce mentioned, the employment issues can create a problem. Even just understanding also the guidelines that for space, social distancing and spacing, and do I even want to open up? People are first and foremost worried about their agricultural business versus their tourism business, unless they might have been a B&B that had an Aggie product with it, but the B&B was their main source of income. So it's been a matter of understanding what the consumer wants to do and how the consumer is going to react to different changes in the market. Let's see here.
Have you seen any of your local businesses adapt, or what have they done specifically to keep going?
Well, we're seeing a lot of virtual tour types of things taking place where you can kind of jump on and join in and take a virtual wine tasting. I think there's one going on. Oh gosh, here in the next, maybe Thursday, there's one going on, and I see them advertised on Facebook quite a bit. And Cave has one happening here real soon. And they just, get the wine out and they take notes and they get together. And it's something that Doug has pulled off over there at Colorado Wine a couple of different times over the years, and it had success with that. But that gets your product still in the minds of the individuals. So people are also taking that to another level and having virtual lavender parties where you get the lavender, you get the product in advance, and then you make it. We had a marinara making class the other day where you bought a ticket and they told you what to buy, and then you stood there watching it virtually on Zoom and you made a big pot of marinara. And the money went to the farmer chef to learn how to do this. And of course, they encouraged you to buy local fresh products as much as possible, as opposed to canned goods for that marinara in particular. So those are some of the things that we're seeing, just a shift in how they want to market their business, how they're going to talk to people. And it's been kind of eye-opening for them. They're getting real creative and watching each other, and they're working together a little more. That's what I'm seeing here on the Western Slope.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. And I think, you and I have talked just briefly about, doing some cross promotion with those virtual tours and how we can help promote those through the Colorado Proud website and Facebook as well. So look forward to
right. And those virtual tours can translate into direct sales. They're kind of like a little wish book. Come take our tour, and it's like you get the big pamphlet for going to Tahiti, and you get the videotape and you watch it, and then when you finally get to go, you're kind of ready to go.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Josh, you talked about a little bit about this already, but you've discussed how you've changed your entire business model. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you've kept Bin 707 and your other restaurants afloat in the recent months, and any supply chain issues that you've encountered in procuring product?
Well, sure, absolutely. We, I probably, in retrospect, wish that I had done some things differently, but from the beginning, what we had done, the most important thing was to try to keep all of our staff on. So to this day, we have kept all but, I think, 3 or 4 people that we've put into the unemployment system. And those 3 or 4 individuals, we did so because they were pretty high risk, caregivers for elderly parents and what have you. And it was just something that was, we see a lot of tourism through the restaurants, and there was just so many unknowns from the beginning that it was just something that on an individual basis, it made more sense for us to do that. Our first couple of moves were to invest into the restaurant itself. So we kept everybody on. We used that time and opportunity to do some updates at Bin 707 Food Bar. That quickly shifted to changing our menus to be something that we could do for takeout and delivery. So our price points changed, our pricing structure for our wine program. That quickly led into what we were able to do with our cocktails and our packaging on our cocktails. We implemented 12-ounce bottles so that each bottle would be 2 cocktails per bottle, and then we were selling those as 4-packs with 4 separate cocktails. We did a couple of different versions of meal kits. We didn't see as much success as I would have hoped for with delivery. Most of our business through that time period was with the takeaway and takeout. We were really lucky to have implemented a new POS system in January. That POS system was Toast, and we were able to use Toast to be able to put all of our menus online and link those to our Facebook accounts and our Instagram accounts, and really use technology as a benefit for us at Ben 707. Our actual hard numbers, we dropped from roughly $60,000 a week in net sales to $20,000 a week in net sales overnight. We were really early on with the PPP program, and we were really lucky to be a recipient of one of the EIDL grants, which has been able to keep us operating. But that also means that we were on the first batch of using the PPP dollars within 8 weeks. So now we're trying to figure out what comes next and how we keep moving after all of the government support that was supposed to last for a month or two has long since passed. We were able to take Taco Party and turn that into a walk-up model by using a giant window. If anyone's familiar with that space, we've got a garage door window in the front of it. So we converted the restaurant space to use that garage door as our walk-up window, so we could do walk-up customers instead of curbside customers, still using social distancing and not letting anybody into the restaurants. As I mentioned, we did then turn Dinner Party into Ben Burger. We did essentially a full build out. We changed the format of the kitchen. We changed the furniture. We designed the space with social distancing in mind. So we put a 14-inch wide counter all the way around the interior walls, so that we could seat guests, a group of 2 every 6 feet, all the way around the walls, separate of the tables that we had, which allowed us to seat some more guests in that regard. Bringing that on then allowed us to add 14 more day parts to our weeks. So now we could keep everybody working by shifting their roles. So we've got, another kitchen operating that we didn't previously have. Again, all of this is at a little bit of a loss, but for us, the big game right now is to try to keep all of our crew, all of our staff employed, which we've been able to do, and it looks like we'll be able to continue to. I will say that without the technology that we've been able to implement, without some of the quick acting implementation of some of the liquor licensing laws that we've seen through the state, we would have been dead in the water months ago. So some of these things we were quite literally running up to the wire and waiting for change to happen, and then it came, so we were able to take advantage of it. As it is now, here in the Grand Valley, we are, let's say, in a drought, but that drought comes with significant other weather issues that we've seen. In particular, the wind has been really bad, and it's been scheduled apparently every weekend. So when we would be doing most of our sales, now we're cleaning glass off of the sidewalk as the wind comes through. So it's this, if it's not one thing, it's another scenario right now. The last week or two has really mellowed out, and for the first time since March, we've seen some of our sales numbers of Ben 707 kind of actually come back a little bit to where they previously were. For the future, we have until the end of September with our additional seating with a amended liquor license to be able to take advantage of our sidewalk seating. Before that law either needs to be changed or extended, or we're going to lose it altogether, and at which point it's probably going to coincide with pretty significant temperature decrease. So if we start to see early freezes this year, it's going to impact our business dramatically. Between now and then, right now, all of us are focusing just on what we're going to serve in October, November, December, whether that's a meal kit or late season CSA program box shares that we're doing through the farmers that we work with to try to provide something for our guests and put recipes with that. whatever we can do to provide something for our guests, and that something needs to be representative of what we are as a business. And that's our struggle all day, every day. And we're just trying to do the best we can to figure it out.
Thanks, Chef. And I'm going to move to Bruce next. And before I ask the question, Bruce, just want to remind everybody to chat in your questions if you have them, and use the chat feature, and we will get to those shortly. But Bruce, the freeze in April really deeply affected your farm and many of your peers as well. And you mentioned that some of these operations will endure the season because of planning. Can you expand on that, or what you all have done to help in these types of situations?
First of all, we hate to freeze out. It's we have about 15% of a crop, and that's the hardest we have been hit since 1999. So we had a half crop in 2013, but other than that, we've had one of the best runs that I remember. We were knocked out 4 times in 1980 to 1999. And so in the big picture, we've done quite well. The problem with freezing out is we freeze 3 times. The first thing is that we have crop insurance. We have good crop insurance. It's a good program, but insurance is never intended to be what the crop is worth. It starts at 50% and works down from there. The second issue is that it takes us years to build our crews and to get the people in here that we really need. My crews are good enough. I can be gone. I don't have to see them a lot of times for a week or 2. I mean, I got to direct them, but they don't need me around. They know what they're doing. They know what we want done. They're very self-motivated. They're high performers. But it takes time to build that. You don't start new and do that. When you freeze out, you're going to have to start over to a certain extent. The third thing is our markets. When we are not a reliable supplier to Kroger, to Safeway, to Walmart, to Hy-Vee, to Associated, to Affiliated, to any of these people, they got to go elsewhere. Fortunately, Colorado has a strong enough reputation that I think we can build those things back. But still, you're always at a loss, or you're always on your doing a comeback as soon as you are back in the market the following year. So we don't want to ever lose anything. If there's another silver lining, it was that COVID occurred March 15th, not July 15th. Because if it had happened July 15th, right when we're all hands on deck, and we're trying to space people out in sheds. You know, I see some of what's going on in Washington State, and they've got plexiglass sheets that they're sliding down between people to create some separation. They're running at a fraction of the speed they normally run. Fortunately, it's summer. They're not at their peak. But when we're in the middle of harvest, our pickers are picking 10 to 12 hours a day. Our shed's running 12 hours a day. Anytime you affect efficiency, there's going to be a bloodbath. The other issue is, had we been in the middle of the deal, you know, most of our trade is with grocery chains. Grocery stores have done quite well through this deal. But the farmers markets, the fundraisers, a lot of these things, I think some of our neighbors may have really gotten hurt. If anything, sometimes something closes down that is your outlet, all of a sudden you have a highly perishable product with no home, and you're likely to lose it. So if there was a year to set out, this might be it. So though that's not what we want to do.
Thanks, Bruce. And Kate, what has the Department of Agriculture done differently to support growers and businesses on the Western Slope that maybe differs from your approach in other areas of the state?
I think that question's a good one for a state agency, because of course we're responding to a number of issues, disasters, other impacts in other parts of the state. So we have to divide kind of in our minds and in our services, you know, and serve equally across the state. But for, you know, communities as on the Western Slope that have, you know, unique cropping systems. I mean, the density of specialty crops on the Western Slope is relatively unique to the state. Of course, our wine growing region is out here too, and we also have the wine board under the Department of Ag, which is a whole nother universe on the COVID side, how sort of the beverage arts, liquid arts industry has had to respond. And then tourism, agritourism, and sort of Kelly's world, how that plays out in the Western Slope is different than the rest of the states. You know, so I'd say kind of what we do in the Western Slope is what we do around the state as a whole. What are the particular needs of our producers and all workers in ag on the ground in that region? What are the particular environmental stressors that region is up against this year? Of course, started with a freeze. We're in the middle of a drought. That drought is creeping north. As you watch the drought monitor increase, hopefully these monsoon rains this weekend will help that map a little bit, but the last many weeks it's been getting redder, as in worsening drought, creeping up sort of the edges of the state, both western and eastern edges. Southern, southeastern, and southwestern Colorado have been in D3, drought for many weeks now. That's starting to edge up into the territory we're talking about here today, Delta Mesa counties and beyond. So we're looking at that from a water and drought angle as well. As I mentioned, the drought task force and the related ag impact task force have been activated by the governor. So we're essentially dispatching ourselves out into the field as we have to do for every disaster. That's where the rubber meets the road. We need to make sure our policy recommendations, our resources make sense for the folks in the field. So we're doing that with the drought. I'll be headed out on the road here very soon to get back out in the field, meeting with folks, hearing what's going on, seeing, the conditions on the land. But of course, I think a lot of our work throughout COVID, throughout the cycles of agriculture are to keep consumers engaged with Colorado ag, to keep folks connected with their producers and the products that are grown, raised, processed here. COVID has actually presented a lot of opportunities for us to do that and to really kind of flex our marketing muscle at CDA, both through Colorado Proud and the other work we do with our marketing teams to really elevate Colorado businesses. And I think that's true in the Western Slope and in Mesa, Delta counties and other surrounding regions that have such strong local business, such a strong name for themselves that folks recognize. I think maybe one of the hardest moments was when I reported about the freeze in the early days and, had to tell people that we might not have a peach crop this year and just watch, the faces just drop and the hearts sink. And, I think folks really do have a connection with whether it's just Palisade peaches or West Slope peaches or Colorado peaches. We've built that brand and we celebrate that brand and we want to keep building on that momentum. Lastly, I'll say that I think a question that remains is to what extent the increase in demand for local food is going to stick around after COVID, right? And that's, I think, something we're not waiting around for at CDA. We are looking to firm up that demand. Our producers, local businesses have had enough uncertainty, enough change in their marketing channels. We want to provide as much diversity and opportunity in those marketing channels as we move through COVID, and capitalizing on this excitement and sort of investment in local food systems from consumers, I think remains a really big opportunity for us at CDA.
Thanks, Kate. Kelly, I'm going to come back to you. Is the Colorado Agritourism Association recommending or advocating for in-person or drive-to visits to farms and ranches, or are you really encouraging more of the virtual visits primarily?
The Colorado Agritourism Association doesn't really do a whole lot of marketing per se. We do more development of the agritourism business. So it kind of depends on the business owner themselves, what it is, what type of farm they have, how much space. I'm looking at the trees behind you. If you had a U-pick, you could put a family of 4 on a row and skip a row and put another and go that round. You can set up extra tables on your farm for picnicking and photo taking, and there are a number of different things that you can do. So we don't really encourage one or the other. What we encourage more than anything is know what the guidelines are and how they fit into your family and your business model, because they can be kind of daunting if you're not careful. And there are some real simple rules out there. The Colorado Tourism Office has a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-step program. It's a little poster about what, wear the mask, safe distance, wash your hands, stay home if you're sick. And the last one is know what the conditions are, know what you're getting into when you travel. But for the most part, we are recommending that they follow the CDC guidelines and look at Colorado Department of Ag's guidelines for how to proceed forward, because they're just so unique. Some places are really pretty good size and can handle a lot of people, and others just, 3 tables and that's about it. So we're not really promoting anything. We're just trying to get resources in their hands so they know what they can use to plan forward.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Chef Josh, what are you hearing from your customers? Do they have feedback, suggestions, concerns about operations and restaurants' ability to serve the community?
Well, I think that we're seeing several different versions of that. Locally here in Grand Junction, Mesa County, we've been below 200 total COVID cases this entire time until this last weekend, I think. Bin 707 Food Bar, as I mentioned before, we see probably half of our guests are tourists. From a tourist standpoint, we need to be operating in such a way that is going to be consistent with what they're seeing around the country, which means that we need to be in tune with what those trends are looking like around the country so that our standards are equal with that. Locally, that we've definitely been on the sort of negative end of some of that because we are more strict for what we're requiring, whether that be requiring masks inside of the dining room before the mandate to do so was in place or what have you. It's interesting that with what we have available produce-wise and the way that we're writing our menus are pretty late, and some of the things that we would like to see on our menus, in particular with the freeze this year, we haven't had the opportunity to use peaches at all, and I don't know if we'll be able to, which is something that a lot of our local guests look forward to. I think that there's a pretty good understanding there locally that, we're working with what we have and we're trying to change our menus for what's available to us. And locally, I think that guests are able to take advantage of that. On the converse side of that, though, for those tourists, they're coming into the restaurant, they're seeing a restaurant that's operating, really safely, but we may not have some of the things that they were looking forward to and coming to visit because of that. So we're kind of mitigating, expectations on both sides, and just, again, I'll keep saying it, trying to do the best that we can, but we're sort of mitigating expectations while trying to provide something that is, as best as we possibly can with what we have to work with.
Absolutely. Bruce, can you talk about the importance of diversification as it relates to farming on the Western Slope? And do you have any advice maybe for newer farmers in your area who have never experienced certainly a pandemic or even a freeze?
That was one of the discussions, talking with some of the older growers, is that some of the young ones are pretty cavalier and reckless, and because they haven't done this. They may not have been quite as prepared as they could or should have been. Diversification, there are 2 big values to us in diversification, well, 3. One is that we are obviously spread in more markets and more income stream. If we do get beat area, we have a lot of opportunity to make up some of it elsewhere. This year we have 15% of a peach crop. We still have 60% of a grape crop. And that's not our driver, but nonetheless, it's very helpful to have that. We still have our processing side. We'll be doing the sweet cider and the hard cider as normal, since we bring in outside fruit to do that. So the commercial part, the ability to use our facilities more efficiently over a longer period of time, are enhanced by being diversified. But probably our biggest driver on diversification is labor. If I bring my guys in, they come in February 1, they leave because they're H-2A contract workers. They are going to leave October 20th, 25th. We under the contract guarantee 30 hours a week through that entire contract period. Most of them leave somewhere between 45 and 50 a week across a 9-month period, which is a really strong income for them. And but when we don't need them in peaches, we're working over in grapes. When we don't need them there, I mean, those different crops are very complementary and allow us to provide a much better employment environment over an extended period of time, and makes us a highly preferred employer for our guys. And we're very high on the who we can ask for when we're bringing in new people and repeat people.
Okay. Thanks, Bruce. And Kate, what entrepreneurship have you seen as a result of COVID? Has anything new presented itself during this time?
Well, I think we've been hearing about some of the examples of entrepreneurship, I mean, down to the operational level of how Josh, with building new, tables in your facilities and opening up your garage door to be a walk-up service. Ag businesses are doing this left and right across the state. We've seen incredible overhaul on marketing channels. Farmers markets have had to do this too, to keep folks safe. Typically you got a parking lot in the summer that's jam-packed full of people. You got live music, everybody's intermingling. We've had to rethink that this year. So it's rethinking business operations, the market channels, as Bruce has mentioned, and the actual, customer experience of being on site, whether it's at a retail facility like a farmer's market or a restaurant, what that actually means from the consumer side. So I'm really seeing that at all across the board, all across the state, not just direct to consumer, but certainly seen a lot of entrepreneurship in the direct to consumer because there's that consumer demand that we're seeing. When we saw empty spots on shelves, it didn't mean a shortage overall. Folks weren't going hungry, right? But I think it brought consumers to a point of very intimate connection with their food. And once you think that there might be a lack or there might be a bump in the road, you want to know who's growing your food. You want to know who's out there with the skills, with the knowledge, with the land and the water and the people to actually grow your food and get it to your plate. So, I think there's a lot of room to grow there. I think there's questions of where is the ceiling on direct to consumer market. But I think there's much to explore based on what's come out of COVID. And then of course, we're just seeing folks staying nimble. A lot of folks have just kept their heads down too and kept on keeping on this year, which, especially for larger folks out in the Eastern Plains and around the state, that's just kind of what you got to do. Keep moving through the season, see what comes your way. But with that tenacity comes a lot of entrepreneurship that I think that Bruce and Jeff and Kelly have all been describing here today.
Great. Thanks, Kate, and thank you to everybody for chatting in your questions. We've been sprinkling them in already, and we're going to get to some more here. And I think the first one is for Kate and Bruce, and one of you can start, but would you please elaborate on the workforce? How do we get workers back, the impact of lack of immigrant worker programs, retraining, those kinds of things? I don't know, Kate, do you want to start, or Bruce? Kate?
I was trying to point that way. I will jump in and Bruce will fill in all the gaps, so I'll just tee him up. This has been, it's an ongoing issue, not just COVID related, but there's a lot of immigration reform efforts at the federal level, been ongoing for a long time. With COVID in particular, early on, there were some concerns, and actually a policy out of the State Department, federal State Department, that had the potential of reducing the ag workforce by around up to 50%. And that was just, visas weren't being issued for folks to come here. That was resolved, but then of course, right around when that was resolved, the freeze hit. So for growers like Bruce on the Western Slope, you think you're not going to get workers, and then all of a sudden you are, and then all of a sudden there's no work and they got to go somewhere else. So from a grower perspective, I think it's been a lot of back and forth, as well as from a worker perspective. So I'll let Bruce get into the details, but I think just to answer the question, it is a long-standing challenge for us to I think find stability within the workforce. I think H2A has, there's Bruce can speak to that from his vantage point on how that, kind of the stability factor there. But there are things we need to address, and just from the number of folks working in ag to, ag workers and folks getting into the business, we want to be sure that there is a pipeline, avenues for support, clear points of entry for folks who are, either coming here to do this work or choosing to get into this line of business. But I'll kick it over to Bruce for his perspective.
Thank you. You were very accurate in your description. A lot of our high touch things, which are peaches, which are Rocky Ford melons, which are Olathe sweet corn, which are Petrocco's diversified vegetables, we are at this point entirely H2A dependent, which H2A, for anyone who doesn't know, is the contract program for bringing in people from Mexico, or, well, we do Honduras as well. And then there's other countries. The livestock people bring people in from Peru, because that's where that expertise exists. But the downside is it's an onerous program. It is an expensive program. You've got to have housing. There's a lot to do to be a part of it. You can't go in casually. And once you cross the bridge into H2A, even your corresponding workers, everybody that's local, is treated as if they are an H2A worker. The upside of it is that our guys, I tell people it's like when my generation was going to work on the Alaska pipeline, which I date myself there. You went up there. Alaska's a great place, but you went up there to work. You went up there to get those 2 weeks on at 16, 18 hours a day, whatever it is, 2 weeks off. And in 3-4 years, you could earn enough money to pay for a house in Colorado free and clear. And so if you manage your money well, you did really well. That's the way these guys are coming up from Mexico. Most of them, $15 to $20 a day is what they would make down there. And they come up here and they're making $120 to $140 a day. They have no housing expenses. They have no transportation expenses. Food is about the only thing that comes out of that. But they are focused. They're here to work. They want to work. And they're disappointed if they can't get those 10 and 11-hour days. And in all fairness, the car that won't run's back home. The wife that's having a meltdown is back home. The kids' orchestra recital is back home. Soccer practice is back home. So they live in our housing. Out of 300 contracts, I've had, I think, 3 people not finish a contract over the 9-month period, which corresponding workers, which is everybody we hire locally, I think out of 150 corresponding workers, 2 have completed a contract. So it's, it is an incredibly dependable, hardworking, focused, skilled labor force. And that's why we're able to continue in peaches. We were in for a while. Then under the Obama administration, they really wanted us to discourage the use of it. So we went through a 6-week labor audit, and one of the auditors said, if we're here long enough, we're going to find something. But that was the nature of the audit. So we dropped out and said, we can't do this. We're just too big a target. And after 3 years of being out, it's, you know what? I don't care how big a target it is. We either are a participant or we're done growing peaches, because we're not going to get through harvest, and not successfully. So because it's a good enough deal, and because South Carolina is really hot and really humid, we're going to get our guys back. But still, if we were not H2A, if we were using local guys and we're starting all over again, it would be really tough.
Thanks, Bruce and Kate, for that. Appreciate it. And as we come to sort of the closing time of our roundtable, I would just wrap up with a question for each of you. What advice do you each have moving forward in your different areas, and for other producers and farmers? So as we continue down this path and disruption of the pandemic, recovering from the peach freeze, the drought that's, hitting Colorado hard. Just give a little piece of advice for folks out there and how you'll proceed. And Josh, we'll start with you.
Well, I suppose I would say, for us, we're anticipating the worst and hoping for the best. So we're trying to, as I mentioned earlier, to decide what we're going to be, what we'll have on our menus, what we'll be selling, how we'll be selling it in the future. And I think that the probably most important thing we can do, our supply chains have been interrupted so much so that for us, the local impact of the decrease in sales is really significant. So those individuals, the individual farmers that we work with, trying to work with them to see what they're going to have available, when it's going to become available, so that we can plan for what's coming through our door before it gets to us, what we're going to do with it, and how we're going to sell it. I think that that's the only way that we're going to be able to continue to operate with, anywhere close to the business model that we started doing 10 years ago and we've been true to, is to understand what's coming down the road and, how to prepare for that as best we can.
And Kelly, how about you?
I think what I would offer is that it's really important during these kinds of unusual times to keep those working relationships together, keep in contact with your clients, let them know that you're still in business, you've got a plan, and reach out to them and find out if they're okay, and keep that relationship going strong. They know we're all in this pandemic, they are, so it's not a big secret that we have to hide, but showing that we're going to take it with dignity and grace is about the best way that we can do it. And I just, I see a lot of clients using Facebook and Instagram and et cetera, and trying to maybe sugarcoat it. And I tend to do that myself because I don't want to face it at times. But it is a good idea to just kind of keep up an honest face and let them know you're okay and you're still going to be there, and ask them what they need from you. And not just your clients, but your suppliers. It goes both ways.
Thanks, Kelly. And Bruce?
I would agree with Kelly. You need to maintain your relationships with your suppliers, with your customers, keep a dialogue going. The other thing I would say is be nimble. We make decisions week by week. The game changes week by week, and be very willing to change the direction you're going if the game changes. And we're all in new territory. The historians are going to love 2020.
And finally, Kate?
Well, first off, since I'm, I guess, the one representing the regulatory side of things, I can't let us go without saying, please check in on your local public health orders. I think throughout COVID, Department of Ag, we don't actually have much authority whatsoever over COVID response. We've been an advocate for ag, supporting our public health, both state and local, but really trying to find that needle thread where we can keep business going on the ag side while keeping people safe and healthy while supporting public health. But really all of the authority lies within state and local public health. So, I guess don't call me if you need something, or if you do, I'll be a cheerleader for you, but I might not be able to say yay or nay. But, regulatory stuff aside, which is of course, paramount in our lives these days, I think relationships is it. I mean, we're 5 months in now, and a lot of us haven't seen our friends. We're wondering if we can see, our elderly parents or grandparents, sort of those points of recharge, of community, of celebration, so much of which happens around food, isn't happening right now. And I think some of the entrepreneurship we're seeing are ways to build that human connection and those relationships while practicing social distancing or being virtual or reimagining our operations. But I think regardless of that, keeping up those relationships, just getting on the phone and calling people, seeing how folks are doing, getting out however we can safely to support local businesses, to support farmers and ranchers. And, I think thinking about the long game too. COVID won't be around forever. At some point, we will emerge from this time, and then the historians will get to work, like Bruce said. So keep all your records, for the museum files down the road. But, I think at that point in time, when I think about where we want to land on the other side of COVID, it's with an incredibly vibrant food and ag system in the state. It's thriving food and ag businesses. It's an incredible sense of interconnection between consumers and producers and the businesses that connect them and serve them. And I think if we think from that endpoint and anchor ourselves there backwards throughout COVID and the pandemic will help us kind of like a North Star or pointing north on the compass, make it through this time in a way that supports all of our ag community.
Thanks, Kate. And thanks to all of our panelists and attendees for participating today and joining us for this conversation. Really appreciate everybody's time. And believe it or not, August is almost upon us. And it's an exciting month for us because it is Colorado Proud Month. So this is a time that we really celebrate locally grown, raised, and made food and agricultural products. And I really encourage everybody to look for the Colorado Proud logo, buy local when they're shopping and dining, supporting our local farmers, ranchers, food manufacturers, restaurants, farmers markets, grocery stores all across the state. We're also very excited at the Colorado Department of Agriculture to be hosting a series of business development workshops. Our first one is August 4th. So please visit coloradoproud.org for a weekly series on business development. August 1st is Colorado's birthday, Colorado Day. So celebrate the state's, I believe, 144th birthday. And then August 2nd through the 8th is not only National Farmers Market Week, but also Colorado Farmers Market Week. So get out there and support the state's 100+ farmers markets all across Colorado. If you have additional questions or ideas that weren't addressed during the roundtable, you can email coproud@philosophycommunication.com. We will have a recording of this event on coloradoproud.org, as well as answers to the questions that maybe we didn't get to live. Again, thank you all. Stay safe, stay well. Know that we're here for you, and be on the lookout at coloradoproud.org for upcoming virtual roundtables and other events. Thanks so much and have a great day.